What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Built in Buffalo Live on what I guess is a chilly Friday night for most of our viewers and listeners out there in Buffalo, and Bills fans spread out around the country. Maybe you have different weather situations going on. It's Built in Buffalo Live. We are here every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. I am Josh. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, welcome back after a week off. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing okay. Um, yeah, I got a little bit of a headache right now, stuff like that going on, but, other than that, we're doing good here. And that's about it, though, but I'm excited for the game. I'm excited for the game tonight and, excited to get into it and everything of that nature.
Okay, I'm gonna go through our title sponsor read here, Luca. Why don't you double check your audio plugin because it sounds a little muffled on my end. It could be my headset, but we'll get through it here. We are proudly sponsored by Western New York's #1 auto dealer, West Herr. Over 30 locations to get you in the right vehicle today. Become a part of Team West Herr today. Luca, we have a big game on deck tomorrow. The Buffalo Bills with a chance to all but lock up the AFC East championship take on the Miami Dolphins in what should be a winter wonderland in Orchard Park. We've talked about before, I live in the Midwest. I'm a diehard Bills fan, but I do not live in Buffalo. So you have boots on the ground. What kind of update can you give us on what the weather forecast looks like and what it's going to look like at game time for the Bills and Dolphins game?
So as of right now, outside of my window, although I am in the North Towns for anyone that is familiar with this, it's not bad. You know, it's 30s, it's cloudy, it's is what it is. And it looks like locally, it's not going to be too much. I mean, it's lake effect. It's nothing like what we dealt with now a month ago, close to it. It's not going to be even remotely close to that from the sounds of it, from everyone local. It's just going to be probably more of the usual, we'll call it lake effect factors. It's just going to be what is it? What are they reporting right now? 8 inches by kickoff and stuff like that. To me, Josh, you know what 8 inches is? It's perfect tailgate weather. That's how I look at it. We
So
could have
glad you said
stuck in a little
tailgate.
bit.
Wow.
We could have stuck in a joke in there, but we'll just roll right on past that one. Um, it it's gonna be fun. I pray for a little bit of snow. I love watching snow games. I won't be there, so just watching it on the television. I love watching just it's constant snow. Not it doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be too much. It doesn't have to be a snow globe. I think you mentioned that just before we got on air. I don't need it to be too chaotic, but a little bit of light snow. We're almost, you know what I call it, Josh? We met through Madden. And I would say, like, that Madden snow, the digital snow it puts on the screen for you when you're playing the game.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want. That's right there. Just that soft little stuff to just make it entertaining and add that dynamic to the game. That's what I'm looking forward to. But other than that, I don't think this is going to be too crazy, at least on our end, in something that we're not going to be surprised by it. We're used to this year in, year out at this time of year when it comes to Bills football, and I would expect nothing greater or crazier than that.
So I saw that local meteorologists are saying that it could be 12 inches by the end of the game, accumulation. They're going to be clearing the field through timeouts, 8 inches by kickoff. And again, they're going to have plenty of manpower at the stadium clearing off the field. Um, Earlier in the week, it looked like maybe 15 to 30 mile per hour winds. If it gets up near 30, that can really affect ball velocity, ball placement. But now it sounds like maybe a little closer to 10 to 15. So I think it's a little bit overblown, similar to you, Luca. But oh my gosh, Jill Stockdale, can we discuss uniform color choice? You are coming to two of the biggest uniform snobs it comes to in the league. So we will always hit pause on our show to talk about uniform. Luca, I know you have some issues with the all red, and that's a personal issue for you because we could maybe talk about it if you want to. But I love the all red. We haven't seen it at all this year. The Bills are going to be wearing the all red. The Dolphins are going to go with all white. What are your thoughts on this uniform matchup? Is it going to help that there's snow on the ground, that the Bills are in the same all reds they wore when they beat the Colts back in 2017 in the Snow Bowl?
Isn't it crazy? That was 5 years ago.
Wild.
So this is the perfect game to me for the All Reds. I don't like watching the All Reds when it's perfect field conditions, everything like that, because as you love to mention there, the color blindness that I unfortunately suffer from is pretty dang severe to the point where it's even a struggle to differentiate players from field at times, depending on the camera angle, depending on what's going on. The infamous color blind game that was the Bills Jets color rush debut. That was a disaster and a half. But even just watching this team with these uniforms on a green field alone is a struggle. So when you add snow that I'm hopefully going to see a sprinkle of on the field, it will make things much easier to my eyes. And I'm happy for that because, as you mentioned, we love uniforms and stuff. I love that we hit pause immediately on our outline to do this. I
Always.
love the all reds. I love the uniform look isolated as a whole. It doesn't make a great viewing experience for myself, but when I can separate myself from my own issues to still enjoy a uniform combination such as this and just enjoy everything about it. I just enjoy the sideline cuts maybe a little bit more than the gameplay because I can actually see it clearly. But
Yeah,
other than that, yeah.
it's kind of like driving in weather. You kind of have to just pay attention to the paint on the side of the road and just hope there's nothing going on in front
That's a
of
good
you.
one.
Jill and others in chat, let us know what you think about the all reds. I'm a big fan. I don't know if I'd like it as the Bills base uniform, but once or twice a year, I love when they break it out. But let's talk about the snow real quick before we get into this actual matchup. There's been some talk about, oh, this snow favors the Bills, that the Buffalo team, Miami Dolphins are coming from Florida. I think at a high level, that narrative is overblown because you have players on both teams that are from Florida. You have players on both teams that are from the North. You have players that maybe play on Buffalo, like Gabe Davis, who spent his entire life growing up in Florida. So I think on the surface, that's kind of a lazy, oh, the Bills are going to have the advantage because they play in the snow. However, for this particular matchup, Luka, I do think it holds water. And there's a couple of logistical reasons for that. One, the Dolphins have had no ability to replicate the temperature they're going to feel tomorrow in practice. We saw the video of Mike McDaniel putting the Dolphins in an indoor practice facility and cranking up the air conditioning, which got it down to the low 50s. But we're talking about a game tomorrow that could reach the low 20s. And with wind chill, you're talking about teens. That's not really going to cut it. And then you've talked about the Dolphins have spent the last 2 weeks in LA taking on the Chargers, and then they took on San Francisco the week before. So they already have been away from Miami for 2 weeks. They fly back on Sunday night to Miami, and now they're back up to Buffalo on a short week. I think logistically it helps the Bills. And then I also think when you look at the way the Dolphins play, it's a timing offense. They're a fast track team. I think anything that can cause any kind of slippage on their feet, anything that can cause Tyreek Hill or Raheem Mostert or Jalen Waddle to slow up, that's an advantage for the Bills. And then one last thing, the Bills have that prototype quarterback, create a player in Madden that you can pretty much run any play in any weather condition. And I'm not convinced the Dolphins have that. Where are you at? We're going to get into matchups and all that, but just surface level, where are you at with this being an advantage for the Bills against the Dolphins?
This is an advantage for the Bills across the board in all reality, for the most part, just because we're familiar with it. Everyone on this roster, for the most part, other than the rookies, are absolutely familiar with this. They had to deal with that New England game last year. It wasn't even a snowy situation more than a wind and just chill situation. Of course, there was the New England playoff game then later, of course, that was just cold. And we had talks about using Viagra as a performance enhancer so that your blood was pumping more, things of that nature. These players, again, other than the rookies, are very familiar with this and they don't think anything more of it, right? It's just one of the storylines going into the game, and it's a storyline only because the media is making it around them. The Dolphins, on the other hand, have to think about this. I don't care what Mike McDaniel says. I don't care what any Miami media wants to say, where it's like, hey, it is what it is, and they're going to be playing through it and stuff like that. I don't want to hear it, because every year when they have to come up at this time of year, it's a struggle, and it's clear as day. Tua has historically been very, very poor in cold weather games. And I mean, I think Peter King on Pro Football Talk Live this morning said, until I see something different, I'm going to always think the same result's going to happen. It will eventually come. Like, I would assume if he is able to progress, Tua that is, and become a better quarterback year in, year out, that time will come where he just becomes used to it and he's able to kind of muscle through it and actually be a competent quarterback. But until we see that, I have to think that going into this game, it's not going to be a good performance out of him. And then everyone else around him is just going to be a little bit slower, a little bit colder because they're just not used to that. When it comes to, you hear that they needed heaters in LA, which is an open air covered stadium. Like people were calling it a dome. I saw on social media. It's right here. It's technically open air. It was a little bit windy from what I understand. And it was abnormally cool in the LA area for them. So they had heaters or whatever. But yes, exactly. If they're dealing with that in 50s, they got another thing coming for them here. It is just, there is nothing you can do other than living in a restaurant cooler that could simulate, a Buffalo winter, or Lambeau, I guess, because it gets pretty dang cold up there too, for just temperature purposes. When you add the lake effect on top of that, which is pretty much a one of one, you don't get that anywhere else in the league. Yeah, they're going to be in for a hell of an experience, and it's probably just going to cause them to think a little bit more than the Bills side. The Bills are just going to have that advantage where it's like they're used to it. They've had years of this now, and it's just another winter football game in Orchard Park, whereas Miami's just going to be thinking about it every drive, every snap, and it's just going to catch up to them probably at numerous occasions in this game.
Jacqueline Rose saying it's her first Built-in Buffalo Live. Welcome, Jacqueline. We hope you enjoy your stay, and hopefully you'll be a regular around these parts. We are here every Friday night for those of you first-timers here, and we look forward to interacting with you all in chat tonight. But let's get into it, Luka. It's a big game, and let's start with what it's going to look like when the Bills offense has the ball, because I think there's been kind of a narrative that the Bills have been struggling either as a team or maybe more in particular on offense. And I put out a tweet from our podcast account this week that really, I think, kind of explains how good the Bills have been this year, because I think there's this narrative that they've been struggling. The Bills have played the sixth hardest schedule based on strength of schedule. They have the hardest schedule in the league based on strength of victory, and yet they are second in the league in point differential. If you're not familiar, point differential is if you win a game 30-10, your point differential for that game is plus 20. So every time you win, you're going to get plus something. So the higher your number is in point differential, it's like a total points tracked for the season. And that usually is a good indicator of who the good teams are. In 2017, the Bills went 9-7 and broke the playoff drought, but they were a negative point differential team, which I think was an indicator to all of us that they weren't that good of a team. But why I'm bringing that up here is for the Bills offense this game, I'm not as concerned about what happened last week. I think it was a sloppy, wet ball situation. I know there's going to be snow tomorrow. I would prefer snow over rain anyway. And the Jets defense is obviously they're elite. The Dolphins defense is not elite. I think there's going to be some room for the Bills to move the ball against this team. We're going to talk about some matchups we like. One matchup I am not very confident in, Luka, and this is what in a game that I think a lot of matchups favor the Bills. There's a lot of paths for the Bills to really get on this team early and maybe potentially even blow them out. One thing that does concern me, though, is that Miami Dolphins defensive line against a Bills offensive line that's really been struggling. Deion Dawkins and Mitch Morse are playing solid. What's big is Ryan Bates is going to miss this game with an injury, and that is huge because he has been playing really well at that right guard spot. Started the season slow, has been ascending as the year went on, and really has put some good games together. That's a big loss there. We know the issues Spencer Brown has had on the right side at right tackle. And then Roger Saffold, I know there's kind of a mixed bag of opinions on him on Bill's Twitter. I think he's having a really down year, not living up to the expectations the Bills thought they were getting with him. And when you look at the strength of this Miami Dolphins defensive line, overall, they are not a strong defense. But on their defensive line, they have some studs. Christian Wilkins should be an all-pro defensive lineman this year. Pro Football Focus, I have this here. They rate him as a top 10 defensive lineman in the league. Jalen Phillips, their first-round pick from last year, is blooming into a star, and they move him all over the line. He could be lining up a lot on Spencer Brown. Those are two matchups in particular, Luka, that really make me a little nervous. And you look at some of the depth on this defensive line. They have Bradley Chubb, who they traded for Denver, who maybe has been a little bit underwhelming so far, but you know he's a high-caliber player. They have Melvin Ingram, who for whatever reason seems to always play his best ball when he plays against the Bills. And I just think there's a lot of paths here for the Dolphins to win the line of scrimmage when the Bills have the ball. And that's where my concern is, that if the Dolphins are going to win this game, it's going to be at the line of scrimmage, particularly when Buffalo has the ball.
Yeah, it's absolutely a concern. I mean, Spencer Brown. I'm not going to go too much into Spencer Brown. This is not the time. I've said the things that I've said about Spencer Brown alone. I am concerned about this offensive line. I'm concerned about everything that's going on. And Spencer Brown, to me, is one of those focal points where it seems like he is definitely having a sophomore slump in a half season. And that is something that I think the Dolphins especially can exploit. They have the perfect individuals on the edge. And then on top of that, as you just brought up, the interior line is going to have to deal with Wilkins. Wilkins is, everyone knows about Wilkins. Everyone knows his MO. Everyone knows how good he is as well. It's a problem. What I will say in counter to this is the fact that I felt when I was watching that Dolphins Chargers game last week on Sunday night, it seemed like their defensive line was actually doing a great job with the Chargers as well. And it never really ultimately factored into it because the Chargers have this quarterback, Josh, Justin Herbert. He's pretty good. He can ball pretty well. He's pretty good. And I think it's pretty much a similar story with this game here. Like, you can do as much as you want, you can dominate, and you can actually have a really, really good game, but it's going to take almost a perfect game out of you to win that game because the quarterback of which you are hunting down is pretty darn good. And guess what? The one that they're going to have to play against this week is even better than the one that basically took over and was able to get the Chargers the win in Herbert, because number 17, I think by all regards, can be viewed as a better quarterback than Justin Herbert. So good luck. It's possible the defensive line can be a problem and can absolutely wreak havoc. But the thing that I kind of have in the back of my mind is their defensive line, their edge, Christian Wilkins, and everyone on the interior as well can do everything they can. And we've seen this Bills team now numerous weeks prior get dominated on the offensive line for the most part, and yet still come out on top because Josh Allen is just that damn good. And even Josh Allen last week didn't have a great week, but it still was made possible because that defense on the other side was making plays when they needed to. It's definitely one area of concern, but as you pointed out, even before you made that point, I think it's realistically the only spot that the Dolphins can probably say they have the upper hand on us in the matchup game. So that matchup has to just be overwhelmingly controlling the game in order for them to even have a chance in my mind. Not trying to tip my hand too early on a prediction here, but it's concerning. I think there's a lot of guys there that can cause a lot of havoc. Chubb needs to step up for them after what they gave up for him and stuff of that nature. He's not really doing too much for him. It's definitely been underwhelming, but it's concerning, but at the same time, it's something I'm not going to get bent out of shape over, just because I feel like we've seen this story before with the Bills where it feels frustrating that this offensive line isn't doing too much and they could be better. And yet we have 17 and we have the defense that can kind of keep the game from getting out of hand, that ultimately 17 is going to make a play. This offense is going to make something happen and we're going to come out with a win. So yeah, it's definitely something to highlight for sure. And I think it's a valid place to start, but I don't think I'm as concerned as maybe you or others are with this. It's something I know will dominate us, but I'm not going to go crazy and think that this is where the Dolphins will beat us. It is what it is.
No, it's kind of like when I play one-on-one basketball with my 7-year-old daughter. Like, are there ways that she could beat me? Sure. Like, she could just suck up to me and tell me I'm the world's best dad. And then I go in to give her a hug and she dribbles around me. But like, I'm not going to live in a fear bunker that my daughter's going to dunk on me. I think there's a path that the Dolphins defensive line could wreck this game. But I will say, I'm very intrigued by what happens at the right guard spot, because with Bates out, the Bills do have some options here. I think the first thought you would have would be, oh, they just slide in Greg Van Roten. He's been the primary backup on the interior all season long, and he's been, serviceable when called upon. That's the easy answer. One answer the Bills could go to: Ike Botker, who has started the year on injured reserve, ruptured his Achilles last year against New England in Foxborough, actually is coming up on the end of his window to where the Bills either have to activate him or shut him down for the year. And if you start paying attention to some of the noise coming out of one Bills drive, I think there's a very realistic possibility that Ike Butker not only gets activated, but added to the starting lineup this week. And that would be interesting because he played at a very high level very high level for him. Talk about like solid starter. And what you look at the issues the Bills are having on their offensive line on the interior outside of Mitch Morse, especially with Ryan Bates out, Ike Botker could be somebody that if he comes in and plays well, maybe he challenges someone like Saffold for a starting job down the line. Another move they could do is Quessenberry has some experience at guard, although I wouldn't think they'd want to risk their only real reserve tackle in a guard situation unless he was a significant upgrade. So there's moves they can make there. I do want to talk about this comment here, though. I agree we need somebody to catch the ball. Help is on the way. The Bills made a roster move this week that I think could be significant for this game. In general, Luka, when we previewed this Miami Dolphins team, we knew the talent was there. I think one thing we were both wrong about, and a lot of people that really pride themselves on knowing the teams around the league were wrong about, is we thought that the secondary for the Dolphins was going to be a strength of the team. You look at some of the names like Xavier Howard and Byron Jones, who started the season on IR, really hasn't been healthy and hasn't been a factor all year. Javon Holland is a certified stud on the back end at safety. There's no discounting that. But in general, their secondary has been a weakness on this team. Xavier Howard, I know he's a household name, a former All-Pro. He is PFF's 78th ranked cornerback this year, having a very down year. You look at the other safety spot, Eric Rowe has already been ruled out, and that puts them down to their fourth safety at this point because Elijah Campbell is in concussion protocol. He is out. Brandon Jones is already on IR, so they are having a numbers game at safety. Their corners don't cover well, so going back to the original point, if that defensive line does not wreck the game like we said they could be capable of doing, there's going to be some matchups for the Bills offense to take advantage of. And that's where I want to circle back to the roster move the Bills made this week, Luka. We've been talking all season long. This Bills offense needed a Cole Beasley type player to fill out the rest of the receiving core. Well, no better than getting a Cole Beasley type player than just going to Cole Beasley. The Bills signed him this week. I expect him to be active. I expect him to be a pretty big part of the game plan. Two-part question for you. One, do you expect Cole Beasley to be active tomorrow? And two, do you expect him to be a pretty decent size factor in this game plan? Because for me, he fills an almost, I want to say the biggest void they have on offense, even though in my mind that's not true. The offensive line is the issue. This offense has been missing those layups in the passing game. Cole Beasley immediately comes in and takes care of that if he's in football shape. Do you think he could have a sizable role in tomorrow's game?
I think he could. Absolutely. I'll start there. I guess I should start. I do expect him to be active. I expect him to be activated. It seems like everyone's been reporting it as the practice squad, which is the standard procedure for signing a player. They're brought to the practice squad and it's just inevitable. It's a formality that he will then be elevated to the active roster, so on and so forth. Beyond that, yeah, I do see a path and I do see a reality that Cole Beasley will be an absolute factor. I don't think we're talking anything crazy and explosive and 100 plus yards and blah blah blah, but it's a role, Josh, that I know we've talked about over the course of the season, and even in the preseason, of who's going to be that quote unquote Cole Beasley guy going into this. And there was hope that it would be McKenzie or Crowder or someone like that. And it just seems like for unfortunate circumstances, such as like Crowder's situation, and then McKenzie just doesn't seem to be filling that role as much as we hoped, stuff of that nature. There's apparently only one Cole Beasley, and there's only one guy who can do that role and make that, find those little pockets, right? Mm-hmm. And just be able to just be that safety blanket in this offense for Allen. And it says a lot that he reached out to Bean and wanted to come back and was open to it. And then Josh Allen wanted him back. Like, that says a lot to me. Two of the most important people in the building had communication with Cole Beasley, and it basically all happened quick. Although the Cole Beasley reaching out to Bean apparently was weeks ago.
Thanksgiving is what they said.
Yeah, which is wild. So one, I really want to know what happened in Tampa. I think Pat McAfee asked Poyer to get the lowdown on why Cole Beasley up and left Tom Brady after a couple days and just a nice little honeymoon out there. Would love to hear that story. And then two, it's awesome that he wanted to come back, and then Bean was able to make something happen, and Allen was excited to get him back. that role is clearly something that even Allen and I'm sure Dorsey recognize and know we need to have in this offense. And I think it will be something, that chain moving, the pocket finding receiver that can just be a reliable guy. And he's a tough guy in the middle. Like, he takes a lot of shots over the years. There's a reason that, you know, in 2020, he had an incredible season on his standard. And then it kind of fell off a little bit and he was always banged up and stuff like that because he takes a lot of shots. That's kind of his job, though. And this might be one of the most healthy versions of Cole Beasley we will see in a December time, which is in a weird way exciting. I guess is the way to put it. Like, it's awesome. It's weird that he's just coming into the building now and we're like, okay, we need you to do this. And again, in a great way. But now it's like, okay, cool. He's also healthy. So let's see if he's still got something in the tank here, because if he does, it could be even better than, you know, what we hoped Crowder to be able to give us. And then we can kind of get it. It's kind of a similar conversation to the Odell conversation. Obviously, Cole Beasley's not Odell and they don't provide anything alike. But what it does is it slides people back into place where it seemed like they really carved out a good role on this offense. And maybe the chips just fall right in the perfect spots across the entire offense. And all of a sudden, it seems like this machine that may have not been superly well oiled, it is. And that Cole Beasley's the guy just with the oil can, getting all the gears lubed up and ready to go. So this train can just get all going into the playoffs. And this offense is back to it. Like, that is exciting to me. I'm super excited for Cole Beasley to be back, only because I'm fascinated to see if he's still got something in him. And then, yeah, I am very, very, very excited to see Cole Beasley back. I am very excited because it was clear as day that no one could fill that pocket safety blanket role. So why not just go get the same guy that's been doing it for us for years right at the best time possible when the games are, you know, we're in December, we're going to go into January. Next thing you know, playoffs are around the corner here, and we need to make those chain moving passes happen. And he's clearly the best guy for the job at this point in this offense. So I'm excited, and I expect it to start right out the gate here come tomorrow against Miami.
We have some comments in chat asking about the roster construction. Yeah, I know you're going to love it that Bob agrees with you there.
Oh.
And it is confusing. So let's talk through that now. And then I have some more thoughts on maybe what Cole Beasley could provide that this offense was missing. Ralph Cody with the question, will John Brown be active again with Beasley here? Do they cut Brown? So during the COVID years, they basically made practice squads a bigger part of your team's roster building ability. And so what that means is Cole Beasley was signed to the practice squad. John Brown is actually still on the practice squad, even though you've seen him active out there for the last two Bills games. The way this works is each player on your practice squad gets 3 call-ups a year where they can be activated from the practice squad to the roster without using a roster spot, and they can be active for that game, and then they revert back to the practice squad. You get 3 times on that, and then after that, if you want to use them again, you actually have to physically add them to the 53-man roster. So right now, John Brown has done that twice, not counting against the 53-man roster. They've still been able to use him. The Bills have 4 games left, so they still have 1 more call-up of John Brown, and Cole Beasley has 3 free call-ups before they have to make a decision of either adding him to the active roster or not. But as Sal Capaccio on WGR pointed out this week, which is great information, when the playoffs start, your activations reset. So even if you've burned up all your activation is not the right word, elevations. If you burned up all your elevations on John Brown and Cole Beasley, when the playoffs start, it goes back to 0, and then there's an unlimited amount. So all the Bills really have to do without even making a move on their active roster is just get through these next 4 games. Cole Beasley has 3, John Brown has 1. The math works out. In my opinion, I think Cole Beasley, if he's in game shape, if he's able to contribute, is going to play a much larger role than that of what John Brown has been playing. So what I think will happen is Cole Beasley will be elevated this week against Miami. He'll be elevated next week against Chicago. This is assuming he stays in full health, he's in game shape, all of those things that we don't have the answer to. He'll be elevated the next week against Cincinnati. Those will be his 3 call-ups. At that point, you'll have a 3-game sample size to determine where are we at with Cole Beasley. Is he a very important part of this offense? If they determine that is the case, they will just simply add him to the roster. Right now, there is a logjam on this roster just because of some of the injuries on this roster. More specifically, it's Jordan Phillips, who is hurt, and they had to bring in Brandon Bryant on the active roster to take that spot. When Jordan Phillips comes back, I fully expect Brandon Bryant to be off the roster, back on the practice squad, and then that makes room for a Cole Beasley or I guess a John Brown. I saw a question in chat about Jamison Crowder. He could still be coming back. We assume Jake Kumaro is going to come back at some point, but realistically speaking, Cole Beasley, the role he could provide here is just something that nobody else in this roster outside of maybe Jamison Crowder can provide. And it's that sharing a brain with Josh Allen, understanding where the voids in the zone are. Cole Beasley is not going to take the top off of a defense. He's not going to be the fastest player on the field by any means, but he has the ability at the snap of the ball to see whether the defense is in man or zone, and then share a brain with the quarterback, sit down and avoid it in the zone. You even saw some practice clips of that this week with the Bills just playing catch in practice, and it just reminded you how quick and sudden Cole Beasley can be and how he and Josh Allen just both know. Think about Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing to Stevie Johnson, and it's just like they knew where each other was going. Well, Ryan Fitzpatrick wasn't going anywhere, but they both knew where Stevie was going to go on his route, and that's what made them so dangerous. And it's a trust factor. And what you've seen this year, Luka, is Josh Allen outside of Stephon Diggs is just having a hard time, I think, to my eyes, watching games back, fully trusting that his receivers are going to be where he expects them to be. And in Josh Allen's career, next to Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley is the player he has trusted the most. I think this is going to be a big part of their offense in a matchup that there are some advantageous ways for the Bills to win. But what's interesting about this Dolphins defense is we talked about how strong their front is and really how weak their back has been playing. But yet a team that you think has the personnel to win by just rushing forward and playing coverage. And then when you factor in the fact that they aren't covering very well on the back end, that would be what you would want to do, is rely on the front. They are the 6th blitz happiest team in the league, which doesn't make sense schematically to me when you look at the way this team is built and what the success points are in this defense. And then you look at what the Bills do against the blitz. I think that's a recipe for disaster. I know they did it some in the first game. That first game to me was an absolute anomaly. But I think if you're talking about a situation where they're going to come in and try to blitz Josh Allen, well, then my gosh, Cole Beasley could catch 6, 7, or 8 balls with just replacing himself where the blitzing defender is. Easy pitch and catch, first down, chain mover, keep it moving. I'm just all excited about this. Luka, we've talked a lot about the Bills matchups on offense. Anything you want to say about that before we talk about maybe the other side of the ball and what it's looking like for the Dolphins offense?
No, I think the last point you brought out there, I'm glad you did it, because it would have been probably something I discussed here. The thing that confuses me as well is the fact that with that defensive personnel that the Dolphins have, they're very blitz happy. They love to put pressure on. They like to kind of isolate their secondary and linebackers and safeties with, kind of putting them on an island and just make a play. And it's like, you don't have to, especially with the individuals you have in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball. I feel like you could win a lot of those matchups without adding an extra guy or two. Maybe or you don't understand just how good these players are without that. I don't know. Like, ultimately, we don't know. We're not the coaches. We're not in the league doing this as our job. So we can only speculate, but it just seems a little confusing and odd. And this is a exact situation where Josh Allen excels, as you brought up. Allen and 17 in this offense loves to invite pressure and create plays off of that, because if there's one thing this offense can do, it's exploit single matchups anywhere on the field as best as they can. And then on top of it, Allen can turn a cataclysmic problem into a big play just by the shedding a defensive tackle or whatever it may be. Like, that's the ability and power of having 17 as your quarterback. So why are you going to commit more assets to trying to stop him rather than just covering more of the field and making him hit tighter windows? Just a little confusing. I don't understand that philosophy, but hey, if you live and die by the blitz and that's just what you wanted to do and you think that's the best thing for your personnel, Miami, good on you, man. Good luck. And I look forward to Josh Allen, even in a snowstorm, throwing all over you, because now that Cole Beasley's back, he's even got his safety blanket there, Josh. So it's kind of, is it weird that Cole Beasley coming just makes me way more excited and optimistic about this game than it would have been prior? It's just that little thing right there for this side of the ball. I am way more excited to see what happens. And it's weird because at the same time, it's just signing a guy off the street into your practice squad, and then he should be hopefully active the same week, all there. But we know what he can do. We know what he can do in this offense and how much Josh Allen, as you pointed out, trusts him. So yeah, exciting. I am even more excited for the offense versus this defense now with just the simple little number 11 out there to be that pocket finder safety blanket. Very exciting.
I don't think it's strange at all, and I've been putting some comments from the chat in because you can just tell folks in chat really want to hear about how the Bills are going to beat up Tua, and we're going to get to that in 1 second. But yeah, there's no reason not to be excited about it. It is what the Bills have been missing on offense. They do not run the ball great traditionally. Josh Allen and his legs put the Bills up in the top 10 in the league in rushing, but as like a traditional handoff team, they are not special in that regard by any means. So when you look at what Cole Beasley can do, those 4 or 5 yard passes can be an extension of the running game. And then just get Josh Allen into a rhythm when the offense is struggling, like last week against the Jets, just to get first downs. How many times the last couple of years did you see the Bills offense struggling? And it was third and Cole Beasley, move the chains, move the chains. When the defense has to start coming forward to protect against that, that's when the deep shots to Gabe Davis. And then you don't have to have Diggs living underneath like he's been doing this year, kind of playing his role and Cole Beasley's role. Diggs can now go deep, and I think it's going to open up a lot of things, may even open up some things for Dawson Knox. Super excited about it. But Luka, let's talk about the Bills defense against this Miami offense, because this Miami offense, up until a couple weeks ago, has been excellent. And a lot of that has to do with the ascension of their quarterback, Tua. So before we get into some numbers, before we get into what his season has looked like, just quickly, what are your thoughts on Tua? Are you ready to put a great label on him, a very good label on him? Where are you at, just very high level, before we start diving in?
So he's done enough this season to garner my respect. And I think that he's a guy for Miami moving forward. I think that you can do a lot with Tua. I think way more than what I thought going into this year. I thought Tua might have been on the check down Charlie path going into the season, but he's definitely shown that he can be a quarterback, a very good quarterback at this level now. I think the last 2 weeks, though, and it's not entirely on Tua, and we'll get into this more obviously in a second. I think the last 2 weeks, though, have kind of exposed the limitations of Tua a little bit, especially in this offense, where now it seems coaches may have enough film out there to figure out the weaknesses of it and what to force Tua to do. And all of a sudden now Tua becomes average at best. And he's not able to make all those throws. He's not able to do all those superhuman things that we get to see 17 do, or a Herbert do, or a Burrow even do. Like Tua seems to have that ceiling there that maybe he can't break through that at this point in time. You know, it just doesn't seem to be quite there yet that I'm ready to say he's a great quarterback. I think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's at least good enough that he should garner the respect of everyone that watches him. It's just going to be intriguing from this point forward, beyond this game even, where does he go from here? Because is this his ceiling now? Is he as much as the offense is? And when the offense isn't working, he isn't working, or can he eventually develop? But at this point in time, I feel like him and the offense are kind of like for like. If the offense doesn't have a good rhythm to it, he kind of falls apart and exposes himself a little bit more than you would like to see if you're a Miami fan. But I'm not sitting here saying that like you can't be playing anyone else. Like there's probably only, I don't know, 12 to 14 quarterbacks in this league I would take over Tua at this moment in time. Like I feel like he's finally hit that middle part right now where I'm like, okay, he can't necessarily go out there and win you a game single-handedly, but he can operate an offense at a high level, especially with the weapons and stuff that he currently has right now, and do whatever he wants. That's my opinion on it. He's definitely hitting a ceiling, though, right now that is concerning, that I think maybe there's a little bit too much out there, and you can actually put him in uncomfortable situations regularly throughout a 60 minutes.
If there are any Dolphins in chat, you are going to be called the biggest Tua hater in the world, putting him at 12 to 15. I think there's people, I'm not on this train, that think he's already proven he's top 5. I think he's in that top 10 conversation.
Yeah.
I think some of that comes from guys like Rodgers and Brady falling off this year, Russell Wilson falling off this year. It's just harder to get to that top 10, but Tua's got to prove it. Let's talk about the season he's had, though, Luka. Just looking at PFF, he has an 87.2 PFF grade for the year, which makes him the 5th highest rated quarterback in the NFL. That's very good. But let's dive into those numbers a little bit, because when I did this for the preview show, Tua's gotten fat on some really bad defenses. And what I mean by that is when you look at DVOA, Chicago Bears are the worst defense in the league. Tua had 83.8 PFF grade against them. The Cleveland Browns, who are the 27th defense in the league, so, bottom five-ish, 91.1 PFF grade. Detroit Lions, 24th DVOA, and that actually has gotten better since the Dolphins played them a few weeks ago, 96.8 PFF rating. What is that? I just threw a lot of numbers at you. I know if you're listening, that's probably not the most pleasing thing to listen to. Essentially, only two teams in the top 10 DVOA has Tua had a plus 80 PFF grade against. One was the Bills in week 3, and one was Baltimore in week 2. We all know the story of week 3. The Bills were missing their entire secondary, half of their defensive line, and players were dropping like flies due to heat stroke. And it really came down to one pass in the second half to Jalen Waddle that it looked like the Bills should have been able to cover, but they couldn't. Jaquan Johnson couldn't get there, and that's what decided the game. The Baltimore game, I'm not trying to make excuses here. I'm just trying to tell the story. The Baltimore game, Tua was largely bad for the first 3 quarters, and then he had a huge fourth quarter, 6 total touchdown passes for the game, but players were just running wide open, and it seemed much more like confusion on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not trying to pour water on Tua's season. I'm trying to add context where I think some of his stats and some of the Dolphins' overall offensive stats have come against the bad defenses in the league. What Luka is referring to, this last 2 games, the slide that Tua has been on, you talk about the San Francisco 49ers, Tua had a 64.5 PFF grade, and then the Los Angeles Chargers, who were missing all of their good players essentially outside of Khalil Mack. They were missing Joey Bosa, J.C. Jackson, Derwin James, both of their starting defensive tackles. And Tua threw 3 interceptions. And actually, over the last 2 games, he has a 45% completion percentage. The tell that we have learned about Tua, starting with the 49ers, replicated by a very undermanned Chargers defense, is Tua likes to live over the middle of the field, the deep middle of the field. You have seen teams now drop their linebackers into the deep middle coverage. And then what they're going to do with their cornerbacks is they're going to route the receivers. They're going to play with inside leverage, forcing the wide receivers to go outside and making Tua make throws outside the hashes to wide receivers. And these last 2 games, he's really struggled. I expect, Luka, the Bills to duplicate that game plan. They certainly have the linebacker athleticism and then especially the length with Edmonds to do that with Milano and Edmonds over the middle. There's a comment I've seen in chat about, here we go, needing to play Kaiir Elam. If you're talking about pressing and rerouting, I think Kaiir Elam next to Tre'Davious White is probably the best candidate to do that on this roster. So I would expect that he is up and maybe even active this week. I expect the Bills to have this game plan, the slick ball, the snowy field, the wind, that could all factor into it as well. Do you expect the Bills to just copy and paste the game plan until the Dolphins can prove they can beat it?
Yeah, I think this feeds into what the Bills want you to do in the first place anyways. I feel like this is something that realistically this defense is built for. Clog up the middle, be athletic in the middle, force a quarterback to make tough throws on the perimeter, outside the numbers, and let's see how good Tua can be throwing 10-yard outs. And to be honest, I think that is the one thing that Tua, that's what you need arm strength for. I don't know how else to say it. That's what you need arm strength for. That is why NFL scouts and all that, when you go into combines, they're like, man, this guy has a really strong arm. What you want that strong arm for is not for throws over the middle and things of that nature. What you need that for is hitting those receivers in tight windows outside the numbers. And in a game or in a league now where there's a ton of tape out there where it's like, oh crap, he kills us in the middle and everything of that nature. So now let's just fly our linebackers back. I think it was the Niners game especially that either Sims or someone in the national media pointed out, was like, these linebackers are literally 18 yards deep off the line of scrimmage. Like, that is just craziness. But by doing that, Tua needs to do one of 2 things. He needs to take whatever check downs there, if there's a check down, because I mean, if your linebacker's 18 yards off the scrimmage and you have, say, a running back chilling 2 yards, well, there's a lot of open space most likely for him. Or you have to hit one of those very difficult throws outside the numbers if you need to pick up that yardage. And Tua, I think, unfortunately, will never get to a point where he's going to be able to do that on a consistent basis. He just doesn't have the arm for it. When you bring it into this game's context, especially now, the weather and everything involved and him being a little bit more tight and cold, yeah, I would welcome him to anything, on outside the numbers, whatever it is, clog up the middle as much as you can, put those outside corners on an island and just see if Tua can dice you up outside there. Because I don't think that would be possible. I would trust the corners that would be Trey White. And then, as you pointed out, this could be a Kaiir Elam game if they decide to play him and give him snaps. Or even I'm gonna tread lightly on this point here. Even if it's Dane Jackson out there isolated, I feel like Tua's arm strength or lack thereof is just enough where I don't think you could find Dane even getting diced up outside the numbers. We've seen Dane can get beat, especially of recent, but I think with the weather, everything involved with that, and then Tua just not being that guy that can thread needles with a really hard pass. Yeah, this is one where it's like I am foaming at the mouth, where if your front four on top of it can get home pretty quick, oh my goodness, this is going to be a tough game for Tua. Tua is not going to enjoy any part of this game. If your front four is on top of being able to clog up the middle and just forcing the outside stuff, good luck, Tua. Hopefully, look, and that's, I want to bring this up too. I do not wish ill will on any player in the league and stuff like that. Hopefully we don't get to see something that we saw in week 3 and everything that transpired after that with Tua, because in reality, this could be a very tough game for him where he's getting knocked around a lot. And this defense seems to be loving hitting quarterbacks right now, as we saw with Milano last week. So, yeah, could be a very, very long day if they just decide to copy and paste, as you put it, with the defensive scheme that we've seen out of the Chargers and the Niners prior, and just kind of clog everything up, force them outside, and just see what Tua can do against you there, because it hasn't been impressive by any stretch of the imagination so far with Tua.
And from the Dolphins standpoint, they obviously know what teams have been doing to them the last 2 weeks, right? And they know that it's not working what they're trying to do on offense. So the common thought is, well, they're going to do things to counteract that. And that's where the logistical challenges of this week really work against them. They're already playing on a short week, having had the Sunday night game last week, flying across country from LA back to Miami to get home, and then losing a day of practice with this game being on a Saturday. The other part of that is when you have a snow game or a weather game, you almost have to build 2 separate game plans. One for what happens if we can't function in the passing game because the weather won't let us. So all of that on the Dolphins' plate, it's really hard to envision how they could maximize whatever they want to do to counter what teams have been doing against them this week. Now, one thing that could work not only in their favor in a clear weather day or a poor weather day is short passes, dump offs to Tyreek Hill and Waddle, screen passes. They're not a heavy screen passing team. Passes to Mostert, passes to Jeff Wilson, force the Bills to tackle in space, because for as much as we like this Bills defense, they are one of the worst tackling teams in the league. I also think that the Dolphins could just come in with the mentality of, we're going to try to run the ball down your throat. The Dolphins are not a very good running team. They don't commit to the run. In fact, they only ran the ball 8 times in a game against the 49ers. That was a 1-score game until the 4th quarter. And I think things like that, the Dolphins could do to counteract it. But I've even read this week that one reason why the Dolphins don't run as much as we all talk about Mike Gesicki as this great offensive weapon and out of the slot, he's such a poor blocker that it makes it challenging for them to really draw up running plays for them, particularly when it comes to getting to the edge. So their runs will have to come up the middle, and that is not where Mostert shines. That's where Jeff Wilson comes in, and he's playing with an injury. He's questionable for the game. If he goes, you have to factor in that he's probably not going to be 100%. Tyreek Hill is going to play. He was dealing with an ankle injury last week. He's probably not 100%. Teron Armstead, their excellent left tackle, has been dealing with an injury all season long. Missed the 49ers game, hasn't practiced much all season, probably going to gut through it. I don't want to laugh at somebody's injuries, Luka. I certainly am not meaning to do that, but I was reading the injury report for Teron Armstead, and where is it? So like on the injury report, right? Like, so for Eric Rowe, they put hamstring. For Teron Armstead, they put toe/pec ankle/knee. Like, how many more things can Teron Armstead be dealing with? To his credit, he's gutting through, but he's certainly not the best version of himself. I think there's matchups for the Bills to take advantage of on this Miami offensive line that is pretty good, particularly at center with Connor Williams. They do have a player at right tackle that I think Greg Rousseau can take advantage of. And then their left guard is somebody that I think Ed Oliver could win his matchup with. But those are just some of the things that I think the Dolphins are probably going to try to do. But it comes back to the larger point, Luka. There is just a lot on this Dolphins team plate this week that I just think they're really fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if there's one thing you probably don't want to deal with in the cold, even as big as an offensive lineman, it's a toe injury. Could you imagine being in a snowy, cold game when you're not used to it and having the one part of your body that's the least covered out of every part of you just exposed to it nonstop and having to deal with a nagging toe injury? Oh my Lord. Yeah, there's a lot to go around there. And you mentioned the injury report. Just fun fact. I didn't even realize Justin Zimmer was on their team. Just
Yeah, they stole him from us a couple of weeks ago.
Wild. That was another thing I noticed on there. But the toe pack knee, if Teron Armstead's out there muscling it through this, all of that, props to him, one, as a person. Like you can't question his motivations and him wanting to be out there if he's got so many different things going on and he believes in this team. Clearly, if he's out there trying to win them a game in the icy, cold, frigid lake effect temperatures that is Buffalo, New York. I think Reek's situation is interesting. He went limited full. He was playing through that ankle injury the whole time. Again, I just mentioned a toe with Teron Armstead. An ankle sounds miserable in the cold. If he has any sort of problem, if he slips anything, that could be disastrous for him. Hopefully for, his well-being and stuff. Again, I do not wish ill will on any individual, but hopefully for him, nothing too major happens. But it's something that the Bills should definitely monitor, because if he slips a couple times and stuff, they may have to pull him for his own safety, depending on the weather environment and stuff of that nature. That'd be a big boost in defending the Miami Dolphins offense as a whole. Tyreek is Tyreek, of course. I do find it interesting, just this matchup entirely. I go down the list and I just don't know how the Dolphins win on this side of the ball when it comes to their offense versus our defense based on injuries and stuff of that nature. And then our defense seems to be, in a weird way, as healthy as it's been all season. There's not too much of a concern. We, of course, have the Von Miller and then also Micah Hyde situation. They're out for the year. But beyond that, I mean, it seems, and Benford, of course, too, is on IR. But compared to where we were on week 3, we're in a much better situation. And now the Dolphins kind of have flipped the table and they have a lot going on their side. Obviously, it's not just their offense, it's their defense too. We've talked about just everything. Their safeties, they're going to have an undrafted rookie starting at safety, most likely. That's going to be fascinating. But it's an interesting time to, walk into this game, look at it and be like, hey, you brought, like, just to kind of wrap a bow on this preview. The defensive line for Miami has definitely got something on this Bills offensive line, but outside of that, you go top to bottom. I don't see many paths at all that Miami can come into Orchard Park and get a win and get a result and be ultra competitive. I mean, look, any given Sunday or Saturday in this case, anything can happen, but they got a lot of adversity to go through for this game that I just don't see it. And I think this Bills team is ready. They're obviously not going to take this game lightly by any stretch of the imagination. They know how important this game is. And kind of like, I look at it similar as it flipped roles when it comes to who's hosting. But beyond that, San Fran had to go into Seattle and win that game to both win the division and get in the playoffs and everything like that. And it felt so good to them. You could tell they were motivated with a third string quarterback. I feel like the Bills understand winning this game locks them in for the playoffs for one, guarantees it. Not that that's too much in question, but it locks them in and then effectively locks up the division. So they're going to throw everything at this, beyond compromising anyone's health and stuff of that nature. And I just love the situation that the Bills find themselves against this Dolphins team in their current state with the injuries, with the matchups and everything of that nature. It just seems like a perfect time to play this game in the Bills' minds.
We are going to get into our West Herr Keys to the game and then ultimately give our predictions on this game here in a second. I do want to talk about this comment here about, is there any way we can turn off the heat in the visitor locker room? So I majored in journalism in college, but my friends will tell you that I minored in petty. So I will tell you what the Bills should actually do in this situation. And it's something that the Dolphins used to do all the time, is you actually want the locker room to be super comfortable. So
Yes,
you want the locker room to be a nice, warm, cozy space where the players can go to and they feel great. So then when they get back out in the cold, it smacks them in the face again. The
exactly.
Dolphins used to crank up the AC on those hot 100+ degree humid days in Florida. And then the Bills would be like, oh, this locker room feels so nice. And then you go outside in 110-degree weather and you're like, oh my God, get me out of here. If the locker room doesn't have any heat and you go out to the field, it's like, I mean, it stinks, but it stinks for a while. You want your body to get comfortable again. And then after halftime, you're like, oh no, I forgot how cold it was. So if you're wanting to be petty, which I fully embrace the Bills doing that, that's what I would do. Let's talk about our title sponsor, West Herr. We already did the ad read earlier. But if you want to get a new car, that sometimes comes with keys. And the keys to this game, Luka, we're going to go over right now. My key for the Bills is very simple. It's 2 words: Christian Wilkins. He is excellent. You cannot let him wreck this game. I'm assuming it's going to be either Greg Van Roten or Ike Butker drawing the duties at right guard. I think he'll also get lined up a lot against Roger Saffold. I expect Mitch Morse to help out whichever way he is on the defensive line. I am concerned about the matchup of Spencer Brown against Jalen Phillips, but Spencer Brown at least is like a roller coaster. So maybe you can get to a point where he has one of those high games athletically. He can match up with Jalen Phillips a little bit. And you also could put a tight end over there to help Reggie Gilliam. You could chip a little bit there. If you're getting beat on the interior, there's a little bit less you can do to help. So for me, don't let Christian Wilkins wreck this game plan. Don't let the defensive line for the Dolphins wreck this game plan. And I think we'll all be feeling great Saturday night and Sunday morning.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Wilkins should be the guy circled on the board. My key to this game is really, it's ironic. It's an ironic key. The issue that the Bills dealt with week 3 was a lack of safety depth and having to deal with the concern that was playing their weapons and everything like that over top with very inexperienced, at that point in time, very, very inexperienced safeties. And we didn't know what we were going to get out. Well, Campbell and Rowe both being ruled already out for this game. And as I mentioned, they're going to have Verone McKinney, I believe, starting opposite of Javon Holland at safety. And Javon Holland, might I add, likes to be up on the line of scrimmage a lot for this Miami team. So I don't know if that's going to be their game plan, because I don't know if you can trust an undrafted rookie back there to just handle these weapons. But my key is literally the perimeter weapons versus whatever they decide to do in the secondary, and more so with the safeties, how they handle their safeties. So weapons, the outside weapons versus their safeties. What are the Bills going to do on offense to really exploit that? Because that to me just slaps me in the face and goes, that is something that they absolutely, even in these weather conditions, should be able to exploit, whether it's Diggs himself or anything else going on. Like, there has to be something with that, because when I'm looking at their depth and I see that Verone McKinley, that's probably going to be seeing meaningful minutes, if not starting. And then they have other guys out there in the secondary as a whole, where Justin Bethel is your third corner. As someone that has way too much experience watching Justin Bethel with another team in my past, I would love to throw against Justin Bethel 10 out of 10 times if he ever gets lined up against Beasley, Davis, anyone. That dude, he's a great special teamer. He is not a good coverage corner by any stretch of the imagination. He allowed 2 Hail Marys back-to-back times on him at one point in his career. Not a good player in the secondary. So there's a lot of matchups out there in the secondary versus our weapons, our perimeter weapons, that I would love to see be capitalized on. So that is my key to the game.
All right, we are going to get into our predictions now. Let us know in chat who's going to win, what the score is going to be, and if you want to, let us know why, and we will put those up on screen. Luka, would you like to go first in predictions since you weren't here last week?
Gasp. I am honored that you would pass the predictions to
All
me. So I tipped my hand early that I just don't see too many. I mean, throughout the entire episode, I don't see too many paths for Miami. And not to kind of roll off here and go crazy, this is a Bills win to me. And it's just I don't understand how, with everything involved, the week 3 game, everything of that nature, how the Bills don't come in here and just kind of win with authority. Just really emphasize that this is their division. This is their matchup. What happened in week 3 happened in week 3. I mean, think about the numbers of that game. If you take away the score, I still don't understand how the Bills actually lost that game. Obviously, we all do know how they did, but you know what I mean by that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when we're sitting there late Saturday night thinking about that Bills win, they would have won at that point in time 31-13. That is my score prediction for you right there, baby.
All right. I'm going to put another one up on screen here. The Dolphins are desperate. And we all talked about like what this means for the Bills if they win. If the Dolphins lose, their chances for winning the division really go from almost slim to none. But if the Dolphins win, what ends up happening is they are a game back of the Bills. They have swept the Bills, so they own the tiebreaker. And then they would just be looking ahead, hoping the Bills drop another game along the way. If they win out, they are AFC East champions. If the Dolphins lose, there is a scenario where the Dolphins could actually be out of the playoffs at the end of this weekend as far as like who's in or who's out. So that's a big swing game for them from that standpoint. So the Bills lost a very disappointing game week 3 in the heat, and all we had to hear about is, oh, Bills fans, we don't want to hear about the excuses of the heat. We don't want to hear about all that. And then we saw the Nikki Smokes guy saying, enjoy your flight home, and it was super obnoxious. I don't want to live in a world, Luka, where the Bills get swept by the Dolphins because they lost a snow game in Buffalo. Yeah. And guess what, folks? We're not going to live in that world. I think this is the kind of game where the Bills could absolutely smash the Dolphins. If they get up a couple scores early, you could easily see the Dolphins being like, what are we doing? We have no idea what we're doing in this weather. We're just quit. I've been fascinated watching Get Up on ESPN this week, listening to Rob Ninkovich, who played for the New England Patriots a lot, just talking about when cold weather teams would come in, you could see them kind of like huddling up, and he just knew they were going to win that game because they weren't used to those elements. Give me Buffalo 38. Miami 21. Luka, do you know the significance of that score? There's no chance you do, so don't feel bad about it.
Yeah, no, I don't. What I will say is that smash that over because that is way over the over under. But no, I don't know the significance.
38-21 was the final score of a Bills Dolphins game that was also played in the snow back in 2002 with Drew Bledsoe as the quarterback. And there's a highlight where Peerless Price catches a touchdown ball, runs to the end zone, and then hugs Jim Kelly, who might have had a few drinks already in that game, wearing an ESPN jacket. Just an all-around fun game. Ricky Williams ran all over the defense that game. I want to see what his numbers were. I think he may have actually even gotten close to like 200. That's not important. Oh, 228 rushing yards. Ooh. I don't expect that to be the case this week with Mostert and Wilson. I certainly hope not. But I don't know if it'll be 38-21. That's my prediction just because I want to give a shout out to that game. But I do think the Bills win and probably win comfortably. And I think this is going to be one of those games where Dolphins fans who had such a high start to the season really come out of it questioning themselves and questioning the direction of their season. And then the Bills really put the stamp on, okay, AFC East, you gave us a scare for a while. We put down the Patriots, we put down the Jets and their quarterback, which you're not going to make light of injuries. And now we're going to put down the Dolphins in a big, big way. Bills run the East, and now they are marching toward the playoffs with that AFC East championship. Give me the Bills 38-21. We have a couple more predictions from in chat I'd like to get up on screen here. But Luka, we have to update the folks on our Underdog Fantasy contest for the season because we did not have one last week with you being out in Stokes filling in. Where are we at on the season on our Underdog Fantasy competition?
It started out strong for me. Let me just start there with that 2-0 start. But yeah, we've both found ourselves now sitting here at 3-5, not doing great. I was going to use this week as a fade myself week to see if we get back on track here, but I think we're going to gut it out one more time before we go the old fade yourself. tactic.
Fade myself.
Yeah, like it's a real
I
thing,
mean,
people. If you don't know it, it is a real thing. When you are down in the dumps, you go, "What would I do?" and then do the complete opposite. So, but yeah, we're both sitting
George
here.
Costanza, whatever your instincts are, do the opposite. I don't know if you're Seinfeld fans, but
Yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
exactly. No, but we're both 3-5 here. But hopefully, we can turn things around here. Both of us get to 500 and make things happen.
Well, that's really the beauty of Underdog Fantasy, right? Is you can kind of have that Men in Black memory eraser because in your fantasy football season, we're in the playoffs now. So if your team had a bad year, your season is over. Underdog Fantasy, it doesn't matter what you did last week. This week is a new week. There's no standings. It's just whether you win or lose. Let's talk about Underdog Fantasy. If you love fantasy sports, you have to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog users have already won over $100 million in prizes. We have a special offer for you today. Use promo code BIB, short for Built in Buffalo, and have your first $100 matched. That's a pretty sweet deal, Luka.
Yeah, not bad. Pretty solid.
All right, the way this works, if you're new here, Luka and I will pick one player from the Bills-Dolphins game based on their underdog fantasy lines, and then we will go outside of the Bills-Dolphins game. And if you have any fantasy football questions you'd like to run by us, we understand this is the fantasy football playoffs, and people are just looking for an opinion for anybody to confirm who they should play. Feel free to put those in chat. Luka, my Bills underdog fantasy play this week is going to be quarterback Josh Allen. I'm going to have him going over 47.5 yards. And that's a pretty high total. But I just think the way this game's going to play out, I think the Dolphins are going to be somewhat aggressive on defense to try to mask what's going on their back end. I think when you have issues in the secondary, you can do one of two things. One, you could put more people in coverage and really kind of play that prevent style, or you can just go with like the Wink Martindale style of that's it. We don't have anybody that can cover, so we're just going to attack the quarterback. Everything I know about the Dolphins says they're going to try to attack the quarterback. You pressure Josh Allen, you get him out of the pocket. That's when magic happens. I expect with the elements, him to run quite a bit this game. I feel pretty good about him getting over 47.5 rushing yards. Who is your first underdog fantasy pick?
Yeah, solid choice. When I saw this line, it was comical, but also makes sense and everything. But I'm going to just take a dart throw on this a little bit. And I just liked it because of factors with the weather and everything like that. I feel like this isn't going to be some crazy explosive game down the field. This is going to be something where Josh Allen's going to have to find stuff around him and make things happen however it happens. And one guy that could be part of that is Devin Singletary. And the fact that his line of receptions is 1.5, just please give him 2 catches for that. Like, just, that is an insulting line. Like, I understand Devin Singletary is not a primary receiving back. I understand all of these things. I get why the line is at 1.5. It's just with the weather in mind and what I think may come in this game. Yeah, like Singletary, please just have 2 catches. Like, please be there for Josh Allen for 2 times when he needs to just check it down to you when there's open space, and everybody wins here. So, yeah, Singletary over 1.5 receptions.
This is going to be one of those things where, like, and I'm not wishing injury on anybody, so I'm trying to think of a way to do this without Singletary getting hurt, but he catches the ball on the Bills' very first play of the game, and Luka is just sitting there like, I am made in the shade. And then for whatever reason, Singletary doesn't play the rest of the game. Happened to me in a fantasy playoff a few years back with Jordan Reed on a Monday night where he was the last one there, and I just needed like 2 catches out of him. And one catch, he gets up and then punches a player on the Carolina Panthers and gets ejected. Maybe that's what Singletary could do. He will get up, he will punch Christian Wilkins for grabbing Josh Allen's junk. That's not somebody I'd want to pick a fight with, especially if I was Devin Singletary's size. But just stay with me here, and then Luka loses his bet. Okay, let's go outside of the Bills game. I'm going to go with Ryan Tannehill, the Tennessee Titans quarterback. He has an over-under of 216.5 yards. Luka, I'm going to go over on that for Ryan Tannehill for a couple of reasons. One, that game is going to be indoors. It's in Vegas, so there's not going to be any elements there. The Raiders have been very, very poor on the back end. Quarterbacks have been having good days against the Raiders, even with their front of Chandler Jones and who am I missing? Max Crosby. And the other thing is, I think depending on what Raiders you get, they're going to get their points. I think the Raiders can put up points on this Titans defense. So what I expect is that Ryan Tannehill is going to have to play catch up against the Raiders. And why are you putting your finger up? Are you disagreeing with a point I'm making?
You know, they play the Chargers, right?
What? Oh my gosh. Why did I have the Raiders? All right, cut it. We're
I
gonna
did this. I did this.
we're
I did this
live.
2 weeks
Okay.
ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're live. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's still a good bet.
Okay, yeah, good
Still a
call.
good bet.
Okay, hey, I'm nothing if I'm not flexible. I'm used to screwing up. So here's what we're gonna do. I still like the 216 for the exact same reason. The Chargers are going to put up points on Titans defense. The Chargers are going to put up a lot of points on the Titans defense because the Titans can't really cover on the back end. And I don't think, no, Bosa's not back. I would be surprised if Derwin James is back. Unfortunately, I didn't do a lot of research on this game because I was thinking it was the Raiders. But Ryan Tannehill will go over 216 because they will have to play catch up. I'm a little bit more nervous about that now because you can run on the Chargers, and that would seem to be what they'd want to do. But 216 over for Ryan Tannehill. Let's go with it.
Yeah, why not? It's a pretty low line. It could happen.
I saw your face and I was like, I was dying on the inside. I'm like, what did I do?
It was I did the same thing probably 3 weeks ago now. Hey, it happens, people.
If he was playing the Raiders, though, look out. Like, just in this imaginary world that I was living in, he was going to go nuts.
I'm pretty sure the line would be higher than 216 and a half, though.
Probably.
So my pick outside of the Bills game this week is going to be Isaiah Pacheco over 70.5 yards rushing. This is a well that I just can't keep going to more. Like, I love a running back versus the Houston Texans. Just, it seems to me like 70.5 yards rushing in a game that could get way out of hand really quick is just too low. That's just too low. Like, we hit on this weeks ago with Saquon Barkley being like 120 yards total, and it was over by like the third quarter. So Pacheco, who is a very good rookie running back, I really feel like he's getting into a stride with that Kansas City offense. The game's probably going to get out of hand pretty quick, and they're just going to want to run it a little bit more than usual. And it's a defense that can be had and some by a running back. So Pacheco over 70.5 yards rushing. Let's just book it. This is not a fade situation. Just keep going back to that well that works out. And yeah, give me the running back versus the Houston Texans. We're going to go to the book with that one.
Yeah, the Texans really had their best chance last week to get a win in Dallas, and they really gave that game away. And you just have to figure for a team like that, they have to be super deflated. And now the Chiefs are coming to town. I'm with you. I think this game's going to get very, very, I know, bold prediction. The Chiefs are going to beat the Texans, but I think they're going to dominate them. And that should fall into a game script of Pacheco getting some carries. Quick, one last question here from Jason Lee Nowak. Hope I pronounced your name right. Jason, thanks for listening. We have Dolphins, Bengals, Patriots, and Bears. Do you think we beat all four? Well, Luka and I are both on record saying we think they're going to beat the Dolphins. I mean, the Bears, come on, you got to feel good about that. We don't know what the injury situations are from this game, but obviously the Bills handled the Patriots in Foxborough. No reason to think they wouldn't handle the Patriots week 18. It all comes down to that Monday night game, week 17 in Cincinnati, Luka. The Bengals are a team that's a little bit banged up. They just got Joe Mixon back. They're still dealing with a situation with T. Higgins having, I believe it's a hamstring issue. Tyler Boyd is working through some things. So I'm not ready to predict whether they win that game. I think right now it feels kind of like a coin flip in what should be a very big game. But I think certainly the Bills have a really good chance here if they get this Dolphins game to the garage and into the victory column to run the table here. But that Cincinnati game looms large.
Yeah, I think waiting to talk about the Bengals game is the right move here for myself, at least. It's like, we don't know what's going to happen. That is going to be a massive game. And I think a coin flip at this point in time is a good way to look at it. I feel like maybe it's if you put a gun to my head, hopefully no one does that, but if you put a gun to my head,
please don't, folks.
Yeah, I'd probably say it's like 55-45 in the Bills' favor at this point in time, but anything can happen until that game comes up. What I will say is, look, I'm very, very excited for this Dolphins game, but Josh, we have numerous records that should show why I am extremely excited for the Bills-Bears game. If that makes no sense to anyone listening right now, you will understand. Please listen to anything we put out in the coming week leading into that game, because boy, do I have some hot takes for you on these Bears. And I am so excited. These Bears, let me just little tidbit.
Here we go.
Yeah, I love this so much. I love doing this. So these Bears were I hate this team more than anyone else in the league.
Jason, look what you've done.
I love it. They are dog water, to be polite and be PC on this, PG, on this program. But they come out hot. I bet on them to be under 3.5 wins on the season. I was so confident in it, put a pretty sizable bet on that. And they came out hot early. They were 2-1 at one point, and then the 3-4, and it looked like a formality. And they have somehow run the table in losses to this point where now they are facing the Eagles this week, us in the Bills next week. I believe they have the Lions, and then they have the Vikings. What a table to run. And I am very, very excited for that Bills game. Hopefully they lose to the Eagles. I say that kind of ironically. And then we get to go into that Bears game, Josh, hopefully with a win against the Dolphins. And that could be a game where we really lock up officially the division. So maybe there's still motivation from this team to just get it done and dusted. Woo, boy, I am excited for that Bears game. I don't think there's going to be one Bills fan more excited for Bills Bears than this guy right here.
I mean, probably not, especially considering the bet you have. I will just say this, and I don't want to come off too harsh, but if the Bills beat the Dolphins this week and then on Christmas Eve lose to the Chicago Bears, I hate to say this, folks, I'm canceling Christmas. If the Bills lose to the Bears on Christmas Eve, Christmas is canceled. Okay. Don't even worry about looking under the tree. I'll make a call to the big man with the white beard. Like, don't even worry about it. You don't have to, Christmas is canceled. Everything stinks. I don't think we have to worry about that. I like where Jason's head is at, though, because obviously picking games weeks out is not ideal because so much can change. But I do think there is a conversation to be had, and we're going to get out of here in a couple of minutes. Luka, do you believe the Bills have to win out to secure the 1 seed, or do you think the Chiefs have a slip up along the way? Certainly, high view, they don't have a lot of challenging games left. Maybe that week 18 game against the Raiders in Vegas is as challenging as it gets. They go Texans, Broncos, Seahawks in Arrowhead, and then they go, this is all off memory, so it might not be in the right order, and then they go Raiders week 17. If they run the table, the Bills have to run the table, or else they could find themselves in Arrowhead in the playoffs.
Yeah, at this point in time, I thought the Chiefs at Broncos game, I'm on record saying it, I thought that was one that they had to slip up in. Other than that, I don't see too much. You needed the Raiders to really be in a position where they needed to win that game to make some noise and maybe make the postseason. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. The Raiders this week do play the Patriots, not the Titans. So I feel like that's going to be a game where the Raiders probably lose because it's, of course, the master versus protege situation, or however you want to call it. And Belichick, I'm sure, understands McDaniel's offense pretty well. So, yeah, at this point in time, I just don't think it's there for the Raiders. And therefore, week 18, all they would have to play for is just spoiler, I guess. But even at that point, what are you spoiling? So, I don't know. I feel like it would take something like the Chiefs, for whatever reason, kind of waving the white towel. Like, hopefully the Bills win to that point to week 18. And then the Chiefs just go, hey, we're going to rest our, starters because we just want to make sure they're healthy going to the following week, regardless if we're the bye or not. I don't think that would happen if they have a realistic shot at the 1 seed. The 1 seed is very important, of course, especially in the AFC. I mean, I look at it where it's like Chiefs and Bills, of course, but then the Bengals, who seem to be a major factor at this point in time, and I really think probably could win that AFC North, or I should say probably should win that AFC North at this point in time. They're a thing. It's that 1 seed is huge. So I don't imagine anyone's resting starters if it's still on the table week 18.
No.
But that's the only situation I could even pray for another slip up from Kansas City. So yeah, in all reality, the Bills really do need to, if they care about the 1 seed as much as I hope they do, and I think everyone hopes they do, they have to run the table and they know what they need to do and what's in front of them. So yeah, it's not just about the division. It's about the end goal. You got to make playoffs, then you got to win the division, and then hopefully you get the 1 seed at that point, and we'll just see how it goes. I do think they absolutely have the capabilities of running the table, though. I really, really do. So it's an interesting situation for sure. It's an interesting discussion now that we're in this situation with the just 4 games to go, but it's going to be an exciting last month of games.
Another person agreeing with you from chat. You folks are going to just build up his ego to a point where he is just impossible to deal with. What's next for the Bills is a game against the Miami Dolphins. Luka and I will be breaking it all down, win or lose, on our Bills Chat podcast. If you're not familiar with that, you can find that anywhere your audio podcast can be found: Apple, Spotify. It's bright and early Monday morning. Every Monday morning, we'll have the good and the bad from the Miami Dolphins game. Luka and I'll be right back here in these chairs next Friday, getting ready for that Chicago Bears game that obviously has a lot on the line for Luka, has a lot on the line for Christmas, because I am definitely going to cancel it if that game doesn't go our way. And we would love for you to join us then. But until next time, we will see you on Bills Chat. We are going to play an outro video, and there is a special deal with some built-in Buffalo swag you can get your hands on. So I would invite you all to stay to the end of that video, because there's going to be some information there on how you can get that done in this holiday season. But we will see you next time on Built-in Buffalo Live.